Chapter 651. Yin Chuqing was so angry by Gu Xingyin's words that she was speechless. In her eyes, this girl was mocking her, saying that she was only a secondary consort and had no right to lecture her. The maid beside her stood up and sneered. There is no official consort in the virtuous king mansion. When our secondary consort marries in the future, she will be the only female master in the mansion. Miss, you should be careful with your words. Gu Xingyin's eyes did not even move as she continued to play the zither in her hands. Yuan Rui's figure appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. What are you doing here? His words were directed at Yin Chuqing. When Yin Chuqing saw him, her expression changed. She said sadly, Your Highness, I just heard that your junior sister is living in the courtyard and wanted to meet her. I didn't expect that this miss doesn't seem to welcome me. You want to use your power to oppress me and humiliate me. Gu Xingyin finished her sentence. Yin Chuqing's expression changed. She did have such thoughts, but she couldn't admit it no matter what. Yuan Rui knew why Gu Xingyin said that. Her unique ability allowed her to know what everyone was thinking. He glanced at Yin Chuqing, his gaze full of disgust. This woman, if it weren't for her family's wealth. Miss Yin, it's better not to trouble you with the matters of the virtuous king mansion for the time being. Yin Chuqing's face turned pale. What did this mean? Was he trying to humiliate her in front of everyone? Wasn't she his future secondary consort? However, she did not dare to say anything and left with her people with a pale face. After Yin Chuqing left, Yuan Rui said to Gu Xingyin apologetically, I was thoughtless and let others disturb you. Gu Xingyin shook her head. You have nothing to be sorry about. I'm troubling you by staying here. Yuan Rui listened to her cold voice, which was different from before, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. Gu Xingyin continued, I've been staying here for so long. When I transformed that day, you also benefited a lot. Let's call it even. I'm preparing to leave. Leave? Yuan Rui couldn't tell how he felt when he heard those words. It was a little painful, but also a little empty. Don't you like me? Why are you leaving now? He heard himself ask with a sneer. Gu Xingyin looked at him strangely. Her eyes were still as clear and bright as when they first met. You don't like me anymore. Why should I like you? Her thinking was so simple. You like me. I like you. Yuan Rui suddenly laughed in a low voice. This person looked so naive, but in reality, he was the most heartless one. He closed his eyes and laughed at himself in his heart. This is good too. At least this way, when I make that decision, I won't be too heartbroken. His heart had already wavered, but he realized that he had fallen for her. He couldn't bear to part with her. He hadn't come to see her for half a month because he wanted to see if he could really give up on her. When he heard that Yin Chuqing had brought a large group of people to this small courtyard, he immediately rushed over. But what he saw was a completely different Yulan. This was good too. He comforted himself. There shouldn't be any more fetters between the two of them in the first place. Help me with one last thing, he heard himself say indifferently. Chapter 652. The sound of the zither suddenly stopped. The small courtyard suddenly quieted down. The two sat in silence. Gu Xingyin asked after a long time. What is it? Yuan Rui opened his mouth. He felt that he could say it without any hindrance. This was the reason why he had brought her out of the Yun Manor. But the girl in front of him sat in silence. A pair of clear and flawless eyes stared at him, making him feel that his mind was dirty. In the end, he couldn't open his mouth. Almost in a sorry state, he said, I haven't thought it through yet. When I think it through, I'll tell you. He turned to leave, but in the end he turned his head and said, You can stay here for now. Otherwise, when I think it through, I won't be able to find you. Gu Xingyin watched his figure leave the courtyard. She said to the system with emotion, It's already reached this point, but you didn't say it. You're not a complete slag. System. She always felt that the lovers of this world were very pitiful. Yuan Rui gathered all of his confidants and ordered them to secretly search for beauties in the world. One of his confidants had already guessed his master's thoughts. Although he hadn't personally seen the girl living in the courtyard, from the words of the palace's servants, he could imagine that she was an outstanding beauty. That kind of beauty could move a man's heart. It was a very normal thing. Your Highness, he advised. Your Majesty's 10,000 years of life is coming. This is definitely a good opportunity. We've prepared for this for so long. We can't let it all go to waste because of love. He earnestly advised. Moreover, one day you'll be able to ascend the throne. What kind of beauty can't you get? Yuan Rui closed his eyes. She's not the same. A girl like her, in this world, there was only one. The confidant secretly said in his heart. Every pair of lovers, when they're passionate, they feel that the other party is unparalleled in the world. But how long can that freshness last? He could only advise. Your Highness, think carefully about these years. Think about our ambitions. Think about the vow you made in the past. He didn't say anything else. He firmly believed that this master of his knew what was most important to him. Yuan Rui couldn't harden his heart to speak to Gu Xingyin. But there was always someone who spoke up for him. It was still Yin Chuqing. This time, she did not bring a large number of attendants with her. Behind her were only her trusted maids who had grown up with her. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a pitiful gaze. Miss Yulan is indeed a rare heavenly beauty. I admit that I am inferior to you. Although she said this, her tone was filled with schadenfreude. Not long ago, someone secretly told her a piece of news, which made her feel very good. I accept your compliment. Please leave. Gu Xingyin never had a good impression of this woman. If it was any other day, Yin Chuqing would definitely be angry, but today her expression did not change. Instead, a gratified smile appeared on her face. Aren't you arrogant? Weren't you looking down on this young lady with your nose in the air? Who do you think you are? His Highness is so good to you only because... Gu Xingyin heard everything she was thinking in her mind. I came today to tell Miss Yulan something. Yin Chuqing had a kind look on her face. After all, we couldn't possibly allow Miss Yulan to not know what had happened even at this point in time. Chapter 653. By the time Yuan Rui found out what had happened and came to the small courtyard, it was already night time. Yin Chuqing had already left. The courtyard was very dark, and the servants said that Miss Yulan didn't allow the lamps to be lit. Yuan Rui walked into the room with the lamp, and immediately saw Gu Xingyin sitting on the wide soft couch with her arms around her knees. Seeing him approach, Gu Xingyin just looked at him calmly. Yuan Rui's heart clenched when he saw this. She clearly had no expression, but she looked like she was crying. Yulan. He called out to her. I heard that you haven't eaten all day, so I brought your favorite flower honey cake. Although Yulan was transformed from a flower, she didn't have the habit of repelling each other. She loved to eat snacks made of flowers and fruits. Yuan Rui, Gu Xingyin said faintly. Someone came to my courtyard today and said a lot to me. Yuan Rui fell silent. She told me that you put me in this courtyard for a reason, right? She looked at Yuan Rui expectantly, hoping that he would say no. Yes. Yuan Rui looked away in a sorry state. He couldn't lie to these eyes. Gu Xingyin's expression became even more confused. You want to give me to someone else? Yuan Rui felt that she was going to cry in the next second. His heart ached, but this was indeed what he had done. I originally planned to do so, but Yulan later on. He wanted to say that he regretted it later on. Then you were so good to me before, taking me out to play and watching fireworks. Was it all on purpose? Yes. Gu Xingyin turned her head away and no longer looked at Yuan Rui. I know. The last thing you asked me to help you with was this, right? Yuan Rui wanted to deny it. He opened his mouth, and those unbearable images flashed through his mind. In the end he fell silent. Gu Xingyin thought that if it was really Yulan, her heart would probably break at this moment. Okay. I promise you. She turned around and Yuan Rui could clearly see the light in her eyes. Those were tears. I will help you one last time. After that, we will be even and have nothing to do with each other. Okay. Leave. I don't want to see you again. Yuan Rui stood in the darkness for a long time. So long that Gu Xingyin thought he had left, but her body was embraced by a strong force. But this time, a white light flashed from her body and easily repelled Yuan Rui. Don't touch me again. Don't touch me again. These 6 simple words were like the heaviest hammer, ruthlessly smashing into Yuan Rui's heart, smashing it into pieces. He clutched his chest. That place hurt so much that it was difficult for him to even breathe. In the end he left. She never came to this small courtyard again. Who allowed you to make your own decisions? He looked coldly at the person kneeling on the ground. That person was a confidant left behind by his mother, and had always been by his side since he was young. Your Highness, this subordinate made his own decisions. I know that I have offended my superiors. I will never ask for your Highness' forgiveness. That person was also a stubborn person, and didn't defend himself. He was the one who leaked the matter to Yun Chuqing and used her to tell the truth to Gu Xingyin. Only in this way will your Highness truly give up and remember what our purpose has always been. Chapter 654. Yuan Rui covered his face with his hand. He knew that blaming this person now was just venting his anger. The main culprit was actually himself. The atmosphere of the entire Sage King Manor became inexplicably heavy. The servants were all frightened, deeply afraid that if they made a mistake, they would be dragged out by their angry master and heavily punished. All kinds of brocade clothes and jewels were sent to Gu Xingyin's courtyard. Along with them were maids who weren't easy to serve. There were also mamas who taught her all kinds of rules. Gu Xingyin was indifferent to everything. She no longer had the kind and curious appearance she had when she first entered the manor. However, her appearance was more in line with Yuan Rui's cold and indifferent personality, who didn't like to see strangers' image. Yuan Rui really didn't appear again after that night. Half a month later, on the Sage King's birthday, the Sage King presented a stunning beauty. The Emperor was overjoyed and personally praised the Sage King for being respectful and filial, a role model for princes. This was Yuan Rui's goal from the beginning. His imperial father was an idiot who only knew how to eat, drink, and play. The thing he loved the most in his life was beauties. He once joked at a palace banquet, "Zhen is the ruler of the world, but it's a pity that I can't ask for a truly stunning beauty." Yuan Rui remembered these words in his heart, and the moment he saw Gu Xingyin, he had this plan. The night Gu Xingyin was sent to the palace, the light in Yuan Rui's study didn't dim at all. The next day, it was announced that the emperor favored the beauty that night and gave a decree to bestow Jieyu. When he heard this news, he couldn't hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, in reality, Gu Xingyin had only used a small spell on the emperor that night, making him hug his quilt and have an incomparably beautiful wet dream. The beauty in the palace became more and more favored, and the emperor was even unwilling to attend morning court for her. It was widely spread among the people that this Li Jieyu had the appearance of an immortal, the reincarnation of a fairy from the heavens. She was grateful for the emperor's hospitality and came down to the mortal world. Yuan Rui became more and more favored by the emperor day by day. The emperor gave him more and more power. His methods were decisive and ruthless, and he had been in hiding for many years. In a short period of time, he had taken control of the situation in the court. He should have been proud of his success, but he was getting thinner day by day. His confidants knew that there was a knot in his heart that could not be untied. That knot was Li Jieyu, who was proud of her success in the palace. Yuan Rui had seen Gu Xingyin once in the palace. She was dressed in a gorgeous palace dress and had exquisite makeup on her face. Her expression was arrogant and cold, completely different from how she used to be. When she saw him, she didn't even spare him a glance. With a burst of fragrance, she brushed past him without any reluctance. One of his followers, who didn't know what was going on, said, "Is this Li Jieyu your junior sister? Isn't it all thanks to your efforts that she has today? Now that she has gained the upper hand with just one move." The rest of his words came to an abrupt halt when he saw the horrifying expression on his face. Yes, she was the one who had given her everything. It was natural for her to hate him. Yuan Rui couldn't help but cover his chest. Since that day, he had inexplicably suffered from heart disease. Many imperial physicians had seen him, but they couldn't see the problem. But every time it flared up, it felt like his heart was about to split open. Chapter 655. Gu Xingyin was also shocked when she saw Yuan Rui's appearance. She still remembered the first time she saw him. Tall and straight, handsome and spirited, possessing a charm that could move the hearts of all women. However, when she saw him just now, he had obviously lost weight. His complexion was also unhealthily pale, and there were deep dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he had not rested well for a long time. It went without saying who caused all this, but Gu Xingyin did not have the slightest pity for him. Since he dared to do such a thing, he should be prepared to be abused. There was still a long time, and she had prepared an even bigger surprise waiting for him. Spring hunt. His Majesty the Emperor, who had just obtained a beauty, naturally wanted to show off his brilliance in front of her. He and Li Jieyu, who was now the most favored of the 6 palaces, rode in the same carriage and arrived at the imperial hunting ground. Gu Xingyin glanced around and saw that Yin Chuqing was also there. With her status, she did not have the qualifications to participate in such a grand event. After thinking for a moment, she understood the crux of the matter. It was probably because of her status as the secondary consort of the virtuous king. She did not know what Yuan Rui was thinking, but the matter that was originally decided was delayed just like that. The Yin family was very dissatisfied, but they did not dare to say anything. Just like that, Yin Chuqing was held back awkwardly. However, Gu Xingyin was annoyed just by looking at it. The corner of her mouth twitched, and the emperor beside her noticed it and immediately asked, "What's wrong, my beloved consort?" Gu Xingyin lazily pointed at Yin Chuqing. "I don't like that woman." In any case, she was now a source of trouble in the eyes of others, wasn't she? Then she would be unreasonable. The emperor followed her gaze, and a trace of shock flashed through his eyes. However, in the blink of an eye, he saw Gu Xingyin sitting beside him. Yes, compared to my beloved consort, everyone is just a commoner. Since my beloved consort does not like her, then, someone take her away. Don't sit here and look like a wet blanket. Yin Chuqing's face immediately turned pale. Being publicly disliked by the emperor, what face would she have in the future? She looked at Yuan Rui as if she wanted to ask him for help. The others also looked at the fiery His Royal Highness Yen Wang. Many people knew that this young lady was his future concubine. Now that he was slapped in the face by Li Jieyu, they didn't know how he would react. Yuan Rui turned a deaf ear to these gazes. Yulan did not like the eldest daughter of the Yin family. Was it because she was his concubine? Was she still unable to let go of him in her heart? He wanted to raise his head to look at Gu Xingyin's expression, but the two of them were too far apart. He could only see a beautiful figure dressed in luxurious clothes, blurred and distant. Didn't you hear what His Majesty said? Since you've ruined His Majesty's mood, why don't you hurry up and drag it out? He said coldly. Many people were in an uproar. They all said that His Highness Prince Xian was cold-hearted. It was true. He could even be cruel to his own concubine. Assassins. No one knew who shouted, but a few figures suddenly jumped out from the crowd and headed straight for the emperor. "My dear concubine," the emperor exclaimed. He did not expect that this delicate beauty would stand in front of him at a time like this. "Your Majesty, it is this concubine's honor to be able to block this blade for your Majesty." Gu Xingyin smiled weakly. From the corner of her eye, she saw Yuan Rui rushing over. This concubine and His Highness Prince Xian are like siblings. She did not continue. Firstly, the emperor could understand what she meant. Secondly, she closed her eyes. Chapter 656. When Yuan Rui saw Gu Xingyin block the attack, he jumped up from his seat. He used all his strength to run to the emperor's side. But by the time he reached her side, she had already stopped breathing. Yuan Rui's hands couldn't help but tremble. When the emperor saw his expression, he thought he was too sad because of his junior sister's death. Of course, the spring hunt was stopped. Li Jieyu's body was brought back to the palace and the emperor ordered a grand funeral. But that night, Li Jieyu's palace caught fire, and everything was burned to ashes. Not even a complete corpse was left behind. The emperor could only sigh. Yuan Rui personally carried Yulan's corpse and placed it in his room. The servants in his room were all deaf and mute. He wasn't afraid they would leak the secret. "Yulan, you must hate me, right? You should hate me, but if you hate me, you should take revenge. Why did you say those things? What brother and sister? Even in death, she was still thinking about him. Yuan Rui spoke and coughed violently. Bright red blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but he didn't want to wipe it away. He touched her face with trembling hands. She was still beautiful, but cold and stiff to the touch. It was the smell of death. I'm a bastard. I won't die a good death. It's me who caused you to be in this state. His Highness Xian Wang became thinner and thinner day by day. His temperament became more and more gloomy. Even when the emperor gave him the title of crown prince at the court meeting, there was no smile on his face. This made many court officials secretly praise the Xian Wang. No, the crown prince's temperament was extraordinary. Yuan Rui was at a loss. Becoming the crown prince and finally ascending to the supreme throne, trampling everyone under his feet, was his life's greatest goal. But now almost all of it had been achieved. Why didn't he feel happy at all? Perhaps it was because his heart had already turned cold following that person's departure? Returning to the palace in a daze, Yuan Rui turned a blind eye to all the congratulations and closed himself in his room. But the figure that should have been lying on the bed was gone. Gone. A trace of panic flashed through his heart. How could it disappear? He looked carefully, and finally saw a withered camellia flower on the bed. An idea suddenly flashed through his mind. That's right, she wasn't human at all. How could she be judged by human standards? Yuan Rui let out a low chuckle. In the end, that chuckle gradually turned into laughter. In the end, he laughed until he couldn't stop coughing. Even so, he did not stop laughing. His eyes lit up, and a glimmer of hope suddenly spread out in the deathly stillness. You lied to me, you lied to everyone. But thank you for lying to me this time. She wasn't dead. She was still alive. There was nothing more delightful than this. Even if she hated him and didn't want to see him again, it didn't matter. The people in the prince's mansion realized that their master's mood had inexplicably improved. The emperor's body could not take it anymore. His body had been hollowed out by wine and women all these years. After a serious illness, his entire body collapsed. Crown Prince Yuan Rui quickly took control of the court. Chapter 657. Beat him to death. He stole food. Beat him. In this magnificent palace of the Ming Kingdom, there was no lack of such a place. A group of 7 or 8-year-old children dressed in gorgeous clothes were surrounding a child of the same age, punching and kicking him. And the reason was that this child had secretly taken a pastry that the second prince used to feed fish. The child who stole the pastry was Yuan Rui. From the moment he was born, he lived in the cold palace. His mother was a crazy woman, and the only normal person was an old nanny who took care of him. That nanny told him that his mother used to be the emperor's most favored concubine. Because she was framed, even though she was pregnant, she was sent to the cold palace by the emperor who hated her. And he, who was born in the cold palace, was naturally not a noble prince. His life was even more humble than most of the servants. Those eunuchs and palace maids, at least, did not have to worry about not having enough to eat or wear. Since he was young, he had been taught by nannies that he should be one of the most noble people in the world. He was a prince, and he was above others. When he was being beaten, he looked at the second prince, who was wearing a jeweled necklace and watching casually. This idea of being above others became clearer than ever. He began to work hard. There were no famous teachers in the cold palace to teach him, so he secretly begged those soft-hearted palace maids to bring him books. Then the old nanny who could read a few words would teach him to read under the dim oil lamp. She could not do it during the day, because during the day, the nanny had to go to the laundry bureau to work. When he grew up, he went to get a set of eunuch clothes. Every time he went to the upper study room, he stood outside and listened to the grand tutor's teachings to the princes. Anyway, he was a forgotten prince, and no one recognized him. Later, it seemed that the Empress Dowager was seriously ill. In order to pray for her, the emperor pardoned the world, and he, a prince in the cold palace, finally came out. Then little by little, he gave up his dignity, put down his face, and put down his everything. Step by step, from a prince who had nothing, he gradually put his name in front of the emperor. Then, he began to take on some tasks that were neither light nor heavy. Later, there was the virtuous king. Unfortunately, By the time he had the power to control the life and death of others, his mother couldn't hold on any longer, and had been left in that empty palace forever. Even the old nanny, who had placed all her hopes on him, did not live to see the day she could enjoy her life. He had always been alone. Therefore, he regarded the emperor's favor as very important. He knew that if he wanted to climb higher, he had to understand the emperor's intentions. That night at the banquet, the drunk emperor looked at the bright moon in the sky and muttered to himself, "I am the emperor, and I am rich in the world. But in the end, I can't ask for a peerless beauty. It is a regret in my life." He kept these words in mind and secretly began to search for those beauties. In the beginning, he went to the Yun residence only because the eldest miss of their family, Yun Chuqing, was known as the #1 beauty of the Ming kingdom. But unexpectedly, there was an unexpected harvest. He watched as the immortal-like woman took form within the flower. When she looked over, it was as if 10,000 flowers had bloomed. He knew that he had found the person. She was a peerless beauty capable of causing the downfall of a city. However, he did not expect that she would also be able to topple his heart. Chapter 658. During the winter, the emperor's illness was already beyond cure. Yuan Rui was covered in a thick cloak, and beside him were palace servants holding an umbrella. His heart ailment had never been cured. Yun Chuqing was sent back to the Yun family after the spring hunt. A woman who had been reprimanded by the emperor naturally had no way to enter the imperial family, even if it was only as a side consort. Even families with a little bit of status were unwilling to have a daughter-in-law who had been reprimanded by the emperor, and almost became the crown prince's side consort. In the end, she only married the second wife of a person who had passed the imperial examinations. Yuan Rui returned to the prince's estate. Although he was already the crown prince, he spent most of his time in the virtuous prince's estate, or rather, in the small courtyard where she used to live. In fact, even he himself felt that his actions were extremely pretentious. He had pushed her away with his own hands. Now that she had really left, he had to act like a saint of love. He stood in the middle of the courtyard with his eyes closed. He tilted his head as if he was listening to some sound. She used to love sitting in this place and playing the zither. He acted like this, imagining that she was still here. Then he was caught off guard by the sudden pain in his heart and fainted. "Your Highness is suffering from a heart ailment. This old official is powerless." In a daze, he heard such a conversation. Then his personal servant complained about the imperial physician's incompetence. Later, he fell asleep again in a daze. When he woke up, he found that the people around him all had worried expressions. "What's wrong?" He faintly guessed that this was related to him. His personal servant's face was pale. "The imperial physician said that your heart ailment has never been encountered before. I'm afraid. It can't be cured." Yuan Rui laughed. "Life and death are predestined. There's no need to force it." The emperor, who had been addicted to sensual pleasures for a long time, didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a bit of fatherly love for this son who had always been easy to deal with. He personally came to see his sick son, and even offered a large reward, announcing to the world that as long as the crown prince's illness could be cured, there would be a great reward. Unfortunately, wave after wave of divine doctors came and went, but the crown prince's body rapidly deteriorated day after day, until one day, an old divine doctor with a white beard and wide sleeves entered the prince's estate. "Your Highness, are you suffering because of love?" The white-bearded old man pondered for a while, and said this. Yuan Rui's expression changed slightly as he coughed twice. "Godly doctor, you must be joking." The white-bearded miracle doctor didn't pursue the matter when he saw that Luo Yunyang didn't admit it. Instead, he said slowly, "Your Highness's body can't be treated using ordinary methods." In other words, there was a way? Yuan Rui's attendant's eyes lit up. He respectfully asked, "Does the godly doctor have a way?" The white-bearded old man shook his head and said when everyone was disappointed, "I can't do anything. I just happened to come across an incomplete medical book in the past, and it just so happened that it recorded the treatment method for this kind of heart disease. I need to find a flower king that is over 10,000 years old, take its flower heart, and boil it into a medicinal juice. Only then can I cure it. However, he didn't know if he could find a 10,000-year-old flower king anywhere in the world. The white-bearded old man left. He couldn't treat this illness, so naturally he wouldn't stay here. The attendant couldn't help but grumble. I don't know where this old man came from, but he's so weird. What does he mean by 10,000-year-old womanizer? This is simply unheard of. Yuan Rui thought of a certain figure. He secretly smiled. In this life, it would be difficult for him to see her again. Chapter 659. Yuan Rui grew weaker day by day. In the end, he couldn't even sit up. He could only lie on the bed, emaciated and on the verge of death. Everyone felt that he couldn't live anymore. The ministers in the imperial court were even thinking that they should write a memorial to suggest who would be better after the crown prince passed away. Today the weather was very good. For the first time, Yuan Rui was much more spirited. He even ordered his personal servants to help him up and walk around the courtyard. The servant's heart trembled, as if he sensed something. He didn't dare to say anything. According to the crown prince's orders, he put on a thick fox fur coat and helped him to the courtyard. Of course, it was still the courtyard that Yuan Rui didn't allow others to set foot in. No one had lived here for a long time, but it was still clean and tidy. In the past, when Yuan Rui was in good health, he would personally come here every 2 days to clean it. Now that he was in bad health, he had ordered his trusted subordinates to come and clean it on time. Those who had once given him ideas were now filled with regret. If they had known that their master cared so much about that person, why would they have come up with such a rotten idea? Now it was all good. Their yearning had come true. But their master's appearance? What was the point? Yuan Rui sat alone in the courtyard for an entire day. He didn't touch the food that the servants brought up. Gu Xingyin was actually here. She used a technique to hide her figure, and sat on a tall branch of the largest tree in the courtyard. She silently looked at Yuan Rui, who was so thin that he didn't even look human. She sat on the tree and watched for as long as he sat there. The system couldn't stand it anymore. Host, he looks so pitiful. Gu Xingyin revealed a slightly cold smile. If Yulan was just a normal person, or if it was just Yulan and not me, she would have died in the palace long ago. How could she see this scene of deep affection? She admitted that Yuan Rui looked quite pitiful like this, but what was that saying again? A pitiful person must have a hateful side. The things he did, this degree of repayment was not enough. In this world, she didn't plan on letting him live so easily. Can one be forgiven if one repents after doing something wrong? Most of the time, the person who could forgive him would not wait for him to repent. Your deep feelings came too late. She glanced at the person sitting there one last time, before her figure flashed and disappeared. Yuan Rui seemed to have sensed something and suddenly raised his head to look in the direction she had been staring at. However, other than the rustling of the leaves in the wind, there was nothing else. After returning, Yuan Rui fell into a coma. No matter how hard the imperial physicians tried, they couldn't wake him up. Everyone knew that the crown prince was at the end of his rope. The Ministry of Rites was already preparing for the funeral, just waiting for them to take their last breath. Yuan Rui was muddle-headed, but he knew in his heart that he was about to leave. His only thought now was to see that girl again and tell her that he had let her down. He didn't ask for her forgiveness, he just wanted to tell her that he regretted it. Perhaps it was heaven's mercy that he really saw her. In the silent darkness, it was as if she stepped on light and appeared in his world. Chapter 660. Host, are you really going to do this? The host's heart was a bit distressed. This was too cruel. Gu Xingyin nodded. System, remember this. The highest level of torment is never torment the body. System. It suddenly misses the time when it was just born, when it was the host with a face full of innocence and confusion. Yuan Rui stood up. He was in a dark space, surrounded by thick darkness. The only source of light was Gu Xingyin, who was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but smile. Am I hallucinating, or are you finally willing to see me? Gu Xingyin was still the same as he remembered. She looked at Yuan Rui with undisguised hatred. I hate you, Yuan Rui. Yuan Rui didn't find it strange. Instead, he nodded in agreement. I did something so wrong. You should hate me. He suddenly became affectionate. He stared at Gu Xingyin without blinking. He was afraid that if he lost focus, she would disappear. It looks like the heavens haven't been unkind to me. Right now the only thing I want is to see you before I die. I want to tell you that I'm sorry. Gu Xingyin looked at him silently. Suddenly she said, "You won't die." She suddenly smiled and looked at Yuan Rui. "I hate you. I want to end your life with my own hands. But when I found out that you were about to die..." She held her chest with one hand. "Here it really hurts." Yuan Rui's eyes trembled. He seemed to understand something. His voice was trembling. He said to Gu Xingyin, "Yulan, listen. I, Yuan Rui, am where I am today. It's all because of my own actions. I deserve it. I'm sorry. I was so good to you, but it was all fake." "I know." Gu Xingyin looked at him quietly. She smiled and smiled until tears fell. "I know you're just using me. I hate you to the core, but I still can't bear to see you die. So Yuan Rui, you have to live on well," she said faintly. In front of Yuan Rui, the hand that was covering his chest, without hesitation, plunged deep into his chest. There was no blood spurting out, but a fist-sized white flower appeared in her hand. That flower looked exactly the same as it did before she transformed into a human form. "No. No, Yulan." Yuan Rui tried his best to approach and stop her, but he realized that he couldn't move at all. His tears flowed out and his eyes were bloodshot. He watched as the white flower turned into specks of white starlight and flew towards him before disappearing into his body. His body, which had always been weak and powerless, suddenly became filled with strength, as if he had been reborn. But Yuan Rui couldn't care less about that. He watched helplessly as the person in front of him's black hair turned white inch by inch from the roots. Her face also turned from rosy to pale white. It was so white that it was almost transparent. He didn't know when his body could move again. He desperately wanted to approach her, but he realized that no matter how hard he tried, he could never reach her. "Goodbye, Yuan Rui," she whispered to him. Yuan Rui's eyes suddenly opened. "Your Highness, you're awake. The heavens are really protecting my Ming country." Chapter 661. Yuan Rui didn't pay attention to the imperial physicians kneeling on the ground. He quickly got up and wanted to leave, but after taking 2 steps he stopped. That's right, he wanted to find her. But where could he find her? He stopped an attendant and asked him what had happened recently. The attendant said with some excitement, "When you came back that day, you fell into a coma. You didn't wake up for 7 days and 7 nights. Even the imperial physicians said you. But this morning, a strange fragrance suddenly came from our palace. All the flowers in the capital bloomed, and your breathing gradually stabilized. It was winter right now. Everyone said that His Highness the Crown Prince would definitely be a wise ruler. The heavens couldn't bear to see him leave this world, and specially sent a vision to bring him back from the dead. Only Yuan Rui knew that there was no miracle. He thought of her appearance when her fine black hair turned to ash and his heart trembled. The Ming Kingdom's imperial court exploded. What was the reason? The Crown Prince, who had just been rumored to be a god, actually wrote a memorial in the main hall. He said that when he was about to die, he received advice from an immortal and luckily came back to life. Since then, he had been enlightened and felt that this mortal world was no longer suitable for him. He earnestly requested that his position as Crown Prince be abolished, and he be allowed to wander the world. Everyone thought that His Highness the Crown Prince had gone crazy. He didn't want the position of Crown Prince that was already in his hands. Seeing that the Emperor was terminally ill, he would soon become the ruler of the world. The ones who couldn't accept this the most were Yuan Rui's confidants. They knew best how much effort their master had put in for everything. Now that everything was in front of them, they could reach out and take it. He didn't want it and he didn't want it. Yuan Rui smiled faintly. "I've already found something that fascinates me more than power." Those people didn't know about Gu Xingyin's matter. They thought in their hearts, could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince really was seriously ill and his entire person had transcended? Of course, the Emperor didn't agree. Emperors were superstitious. After Yuan Rui's illness caused a vision, He firmly believed that his son wasn't ordinary and would be able to properly inherit the throne. Yuan Rui disappeared. The crown prince didn't go to court for several days. The reason was that he needed to properly rest. However, after several days passed, the emperor became suspicious. He sent people to investigate and found that the crown prince had already disappeared. In the capital of Ming Kingdom, there was one less crown prince. In the sparsely populated mountain forest, there was one more solitary young master. Yuan Rui had a general understanding of the habits of flowers and plants. He had always known that although Gu Xingyin liked the liveliness of the human world, in essence she preferred a quiet place with many of her own kind. Furthermore, Yuan Rui remembered seeing her appearance in his dream. With her appearance, she probably wouldn't go to a place where humans gathered, right? In fact, he had an even scarier guess in his heart. Could she have already? But he had never touched this part. He had always told himself that he owed her so much. She would definitely not be satisfied if she hadn't gotten it all back from him. In fact, his guess was not wrong. Gu Xingyin came to a valley near the border of the Ming Kingdom that almost no one had set foot in. Her health wasn't particularly bad. Originally, as a plant body, Yulan would definitely not be able to survive after losing her flower heart. The Elven Queen's nature magic from the previous world saved her. However, even though she had survived, her immortal body had been destroyed, and she had less than a tenth of her magic left. Right now, she was not much different from an ordinary human woman. In fact, her body was even weaker than theirs. Chapter 662. Host, how do you feel? The system asked. Gu Xingyin smiled. Not bad. She used what little strength she had left to build a very beautiful treehouse in this small valley. Although her immortal body was no longer there, this body's instinctive closeness to animals and plants was still there. Every day, a cicadere or a few little monkeys would bring her fresh fruits or sweet nectar. For Gu Xingyin, these things were enough to satisfy this body. How are Yin Chuqing and Yuan Rui? She still hadn't forgotten about these two. One was her mission target, and the other was her lover who needed to be properly trained. Yin Chuqing married that high scholar. Because of her beauty, that high scholar was completely obedient to her. Yuan Rui gave up his position as the crown prince and has been looking for you all this time, the system replied. He actually gave up his position as the crown prince? Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. She knew how deep that person's obsession with power was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally given her to the emperor. Yet when it was so easy to get, he gave it up. She really didn't know whether to call him sentimental or stupid. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have waited until now. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but sigh. The system continued. There is a saying in the human world that is very widespread. Only after losing something does one know how to cherish it. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. The system suddenly asked, Host, do you plan to meet him? Gu Xingyin replied, Of course I will meet him, but not now. Let him slowly search for me for a while. As for Yin Chuqing, she had the system keep an eye on her. Let's wait until this body recovers a little. The current her was really too weak. Even walking a few steps would make her feel extremely weak. She told those little animals not to look for her for the time being, then closed her eyes and began to cultivate. However, even she herself didn't know that this seclusion took 2 years. Gu Xingyin was woken up by the system. Such a coincidence. The system told her that the two people she had been paying attention to had actually come to this valley together. Relying on her family's wealth, Yin Chuqing got her husband a job outside the country. This time, the two of them set off together to take up the post. Unexpectedly, the roads here were complicated, and they got lost. Somehow they ended up in this valley. As for Yuan Rui, in these 2 years, he had traveled to almost every place in the Ming Kingdom. When he came to this place and asked around, a hunter told him that this place had a very beautiful valley. There were all kinds of strange flowers and plants inside, but at the same time, there were many ferocious beasts inside. Normally, they wouldn't dare to enter. He had been to dozens of such places, if not 100. However, this time he had an inexplicable feeling that Yulan might be here. This was not the first time he had such a feeling. Every time he went to a new place, he would have infinite hope that she would be there, but in reality, he was disappointed every time. The so-called feeling was nothing more than a way to comfort himself. He was afraid that if he didn't even have this little bit of hope, he really wouldn't have the motivation to continue walking. Yin Chuqing and the others came a little earlier. After getting lost, they had been walking for an entire morning. When the coachman saw that it seemed to be very quiet and safe, he took the initiative and drove the carriage to the valley, preparing to rest for a while and find some water to drink. Yin Chuqing and her husband also came down to take a breather. This place is quite interesting, Yin Chuqing said in amazement. She swept her eyes around and saw the treehouse that was obviously built by man. Chapter 663. She couldn't help but feel nervous. It was hard not to be suspicious of a house like this in a place where there was obviously no sign of human habitation. She told her husband about it. When the high scholar heard this, his expression changed. For scholars like him, when he was young, he had read a lot of stories about monsters in the forest. Every single one of them would appear in his mind. "Why don't we leave quickly?" he said to Yin Chuqing. Yin Chuqing also felt that this place was strange and nodded. However, at this moment, a few deer cries came from a corner not far away. A white figure sitting on a sick deer slowly walked toward them. That person had a head full of silver hair, but he was unbelievably young and had an astonishingly beautiful face. Coupled with his pure white clothes and the sick deer beneath him, it was hard not to think of something in such an environment. Yin Chuqing's expression changed immediately. However, her expression changed not because she thought of something bad, but because that face was too familiar. She would never forget who it was that had caused her to fall into such a predicament with just a few words. It was impossible to say that she didn't feel wronged after marrying such a useless man with no backing. Yin Chuqing couldn't sleep at night countless times, secretly hating her bad luck and fate. Similarly, the hatred in her heart towards Li Jieyu, who had caused her to become like this, could be imagined. If that woman hadn't died long ago, she probably wouldn't have been willing to leave the capital of Ming country so easily. When she suddenly saw the woman on the sick deer, she forgot to be afraid and screamed, "Li Jieyu?" The white-haired woman had an indifferent expression. Her skin was so pale that it was almost transparent, and coupled with her white hair, she didn't look like a normal human at all. "Who are you people? What are you doing in my valley?" she asked coldly. As soon as she spoke, her unfamiliar tone made Yin Chuqing come back to her senses. That's right, Li Jieyu had died long ago. She took a blow for the emperor and died on the spot. Because of a big fire, not even a complete corpse was left behind. At that time, she felt incomparably happy. Yin Chuqing glanced at Gu Xingyin again. That Li Jieyu wasn't as cold as the one in front of her, so cold that she didn't seem like a real person. While Yin Chuqing was lost in thought, the man beside her spoke up. Miss, please forgive me. I was just passing by this place with my wife and wanted to see if there was a water source." Yin Chuqing turned her head and looked at the familiar emotions in the man's eyes. That was infatuation and lust. This man had shown such a look to her countless times. Sure enough, no woman with a face like that was good. As Yin Chuqing looked at Gu Xingyin, a malicious thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Outsiders are not welcome here. You can leave. Gu Xingyin was still sitting on Lu, or without any change in her expression. Husband. Yin Chuqing suddenly called out to her husband. The man turned his head. She gently leaned over and whispered a few words in his ear. A look of pleasant surprise flashed across the man's face. He looked at her with joy. Wife, are you serious? Yin Chuqing sneered in her heart, but her expression was one of deep affection. This concubine is sincere for you, husband. Of course I'm serious. Chapter 664. A sense of disgust welled up in Gu Xingyin's heart. This Yin Chuqing doesn't even know that I'm that Yulan from back then. I have no enmity with her, but she actually has such vicious thoughts about me just because of my appearance. She said to her husband, Husband, I think that woman is alone in this deep mountain, so I'm afraid she doesn't have any relatives. Why don't we bring her back to the residence and you take her as your wife? I also like having a beautiful sister. That man was also a fool. He had lustful thoughts about Gu Xingyin again. After listening to his wife's words, he actually had some thoughts about it. But in reality, what was Yin Chuqing thinking? She wanted to cut open this seductive face one by one, then send her to a lowly brothel, and let her be trampled on by thousands of people. It was exactly the same as in the original plot. Soon, that man put on a righteous face and said to Gu Xingyin, "Miss, there's no one in the valley, so I'm afraid it's very dangerous. I wonder if you're willing to leave this place with us?" Gu Xingyin frowned. "I'm not willing. Hurry up and leave this place." That man put on a face that said, "I'm doing this for your sake." He said, "Miss, how can you say that? We have good intentions. This deep mountain forest is very dangerous." Gu Xingyin said coldly, "Don't talk nonsense. I won't go with you." Yin Chuqing said, "Then don't blame us for being impolite." She gave a look, and the carriage drivers and guards quietly surrounded Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. She was waiting for them to make a move. On the surface, she frowned. "What are you doing?" Yin Chuqing said with a smile, "Please come with us, Mississippi." The cicadere under Gu Xingyin kicked its hooves uneasily. Obviously, the approaching humans made it very uneasy. Gu Xingyin lowered her head and patted it twice to comfort it. She looked at the person who walked in, and took out a small bamboo flute from her sleeve. She put it to her mouth and blew it. Melodious music echoed throughout the valley. Yuan Rui, who was outside, also heard the sound of the flute. There was someone in the valley. He didn't know why, but this knowledge made him excited, and he hurriedly walked towards the valley. On the other side, when Yin Chuqing heard Gu Xingyin play the flute, for some reason, she suddenly panicked. She said loudly, "Hurry up and catch him. Let's leave as soon as possible. This place is a bit strange." "Yes, madam." The coachman was an old servant of the Yin family. He wanted to show off his skills in front of the madam, so he ran the fastest. Just as his hand was about to touch Gu Xingyin, a heart-shaking roar rang out, causing everyone to tremble. Immediately after, the coachman felt a strong force on his back, slapping him to the side. Pfft! He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Everyone looked at the huge creature that appeared in front of Gu Xingyin in horror. How can there be a dumb insect?" Yin Chuqing's husband said in panic. The dumb insect was standing beside Gu Xingyin. When the cicadere saw it, it wasn't afraid at all. "This woman. She's not human, right?" Yin Chuqing's husband said with a trembling voice. How could a normal person be with a dumb insect? Yin Chuqing was also a bit scared, but she still said, "Don't be afraid. We have many people, and we have weapons. It's just a dumb insect, don't be afraid." Just as she finished speaking, a gust of wind blew past. She felt pain on her face, and something warm flowed down. It was blood. Chapter 665. She screamed all of a sudden. Yin Chuqing covered her face and raised her head. She saw the culprit just now. It was a small white monkey. When it saw her looking over, it proudly stretched out its hand and waved it at her. There was even a trace of blood on its sharp nails. Clearly, it was this that had scratched her face just now. "Damned beast!" Yin Chuqing cursed in a shrill voice. She said to the people around her, "Go and catch that little beast. I want to skin it and pull out its tendons." However, no one moved. Yin Chuqing's clothes were carefully tugged. Her husband gestured for her to look to the side. Yin Chuqing raised her head, and the scene in front of her made her scalp tingle. She didn't know when, but the rebellious forest, the open space, and even behind them were densely packed with all kinds of animals. Not only were there ferocious beasts like bugs, but there were also poisonous creatures like snakes. Yin Chuqing even saw a few little rabbits. Only now did she realize that she was afraid. She secretly hated herself for losing her cool when she saw this face. This girl lived alone in such a place, so it was obvious that she was not an ordinary person. How could they easily provoke her? From the looks of it, this person, who knew what kind of monster she was. She forced a smile. "This is all a misunderstanding. Since you're unwilling to leave with us, we naturally won't force you." Gu Xingyin only said coldly, "Get out of here immediately." Yin Chuqing's husband immediately nodded. Okay. Let these return. We'll leave immediately." Gu Xingyin stretched out her hand and waved it. The animals behind them neatly retreated to the sides. Their eyes were still fixed on them, as if they were staring at prey in front of their mouths. They didn't dare to delay any longer, and hurriedly left in the carriage. "Husband, are we going to leave just like that?" Yin Chuqing covered her face. She didn't know what was going on there. Even after using medicine, the bleeding still couldn't be stopped. Naturally, she was extremely unwilling in her heart. Her husband unyieldingly said, "What else do you want to do? Become food in the mouths of those ferocious beasts?" Yin Chuqing opened her mouth and said indignantly, "We can report this to the authorities." "Stop it." Her husband suddenly said angrily, "Don't make trouble all day long." He was also afraid in his heart. In that situation just now, the slightest carelessness would have caused all of them to die there. It was all because of this woman who was used to causing trouble. Otherwise, why would he be so worried? "How dare you scold me? Zhang Yuan, have you forgotten who was the one who paid for this position? How dare you be so fierce to me?" Yin Chuqing was stunned for a moment before she suddenly cried out. Zhang Yuan's face darkened when he heard this. As a man, no matter how soft-hearted he was, using his wife's family's influence to buy a vacancy would tarnish his reputation. This is simply unreasonable. He felt that he really couldn't stand this woman anymore. With a cold snort, he lifted the curtain and left. There were horses outside. "Miss, if you say that about the son-in-law." Yin Chuqing's servant girl was a little uneasy. Did I say something wrong? If it weren't for my Yin family, he would still be that worthless trash," Yin Chuqing said coldly. This scene was faithfully reported to Gu Xingyin by the system. Gu Xingyin retracted her gaze. Very good, the seeds of suspicion and discord had been planted. She didn't need to take action for the following matter. Those two people could court death by themselves. Chapter 666. All she did was let the little white monkey grab a type of fruit. Yin Chuqing's face would never recover. That man was the most mentally unstable. A small chaos spell could make him change into a different person without a sound. She got the animals to leave and got off the sick deer herself. "Thank you for your hard work, little deer. Go back quickly." The little deer reluctantly rubbed itself against her body for a while before finally letting go of her. "Yulan." A voice that was trembling with excitement rang out not far away. Yuan Rui had been here for a while. Unlike Yin Chuqing, he knew at first glance that Gu Xingyin was his Yulan. He watched as she sent those people away in a few moves. The current Yulan was very different from the past. Gu Xingyin frowned, her expression still cold. "Who are you?" Without waiting for Yuan Rui to speak, she continued. "Outsiders are not welcome here. Leave immediately." That unfamiliar look made Yuan Rui's heart ache. He smiled. "Yulan, I know you hate me, but please don't pretend not to know me." He would rather she hate him for the rest of her life than let her not want to have a past between the two of them. Gu Xingyin said coldly, "I'm not the Yulan you speak of. If you don't leave, you'll have to bear the consequences." Yuan Rui looked at her pale and translucent skin and long white hair. The guilt and pain in his heart could not be stopped. He would never forget who it was that had brought this to her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion and did not say anything. The large insect from before walked out again and growled at Yuan Rui in a low voice, full of warning. Yuan Rui did not want to have a conflict with her, so he could only say helplessly, Okay. If you let me leave, I'll leave. Don't be angry." After saying that, he really turned and left. Gu Xingyin felt that he was not someone who would give up so easily. Sure enough, the system told her that Yuan Rui had built a small bamboo house outside the valley. He planned to stay there for a long time. "Host, what do you plan to do?" the system asked. Gu Xingyin was drinking a cup of sweet nectar. She was in a good mood as she greeted the little fellow who brought her something. "What do you mean?" "We'll leave once we've completed our mission," she said calmly. Anyway, as long as Yin Chuqing wasn't doing well, her mission was basically completed. As for Yulan herself, No one could say that she wasn't living a good life in such a valley as she lived like an immortal. The system immediately understood. She didn't want to bother with the person outside at all. The system was a little conflicted, but it still advised, looking at him, it's obvious that he's deeply in love with the host, and he knows he's wrong. Gu Xingyin looked at the system with a faint smile. What benefits did he give you? Or what is his identity that makes you speak so well of him? The system immediately chose to shut up. Yuan Rui really did live outside. He would often take a stroll in the valley, and then take the initiative to leave when he crossed the line drawn by the people inside. In fact, he did it on purpose. He just wanted to see her often. He had long stopped expecting that person to forgive him. Being able to see her often and see her lively face looking at him was already the greatest fortune in his life. Chapter 667. In the blink of an eye, it was the time when spring flowers were blooming. This was the season when flowers bloomed and all plants loved it the most, but it became Gu Xingyin's most painful time, because she had lost her heart of a flower. Even if nature magic could save her life, it would not be able to restore her heart. On this day, Yuanru came to the valley as usual. He quietly stood there, waiting for that person to appear and use a cold and unfamiliar tone to drive him away. He knew that his method was very shameless, but there was no other way. He could only use this method to see her. But no one came. He waited for a long time. Normally, she would have already appeared at this time. Yuanru thought in his heart. Could it be that she was already tired of him and didn't even want to see him? No, that couldn't be right. She didn't know him right now, so she shouldn't be so heartless. He suddenly had a bad premonition as he walked towards the treehouse not far away. 2 years passed. He knew that she lived here, but he had never come this close because she didn't allow it. With a light jump, he stood firmly on a thick branch. There was a green snake coiled up on the branch. When it saw this uninvited guest, it coldly spat out its tongue, warning him not to come close. Yuanru gently flicked his hand, and the snake seemed to have been hit by something invisible. It was dizzy and almost fell from the tree. It could only tightly wrap its body around the branch. Yuanru didn't look at it, and directly pushed it away. This house was built very delicately. It could be seen that she was living a good life here. Yuanru came to this conclusion. But in the next second, the scene in front of him made him completely overturn this conclusion. That person was curled up on the bed with her brows tightly knitted. Looking carefully, there was even cold sweat on her forehead. It was clear that she was in great pain. What was going on? Yuanru didn't have time to think about it. He quickly walked to the bed and reached out to touch her forehead. So cold. Yulan. Yulan? He softly called out. He had never hated himself so much before. He didn't even know what he could do to ease her pain. He could only quietly sit with her on the side. Pain. She was still murmuring. She didn't say anything else but this one sentence. Yuanru looked at her hand tightly covering her chest, and suddenly understood something in his heart. A huge sense of guilt drowned him. He had long known that in order to save his life, she had lost her heart. It was impossible for her to not pay the price. Looking at her hair turning white in an instant, one could tell how great the price she had to pay was. But knowing was one thing. Seeing her in such pain with his own eyes, Yuanru's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Why are you so stupid? A person like him deserved to die. It wasn't worth her doing anything. By the time Gu Xingyin regained her consciousness, several days had already passed. She immediately sensed that someone was in the room. The only human in this valley was Yuanru. Who allowed you to come in? She looked at him coldly and defensively. Yuanru laughed. Yulan, are you still going to pretend that you don't know me? Gu Xingyin was silent. She knew that Yuanru had seen her in pain. Even if he didn't see it, this man had never doubted that she was Yulan. Chapter 668. So what if I know you? So what if I don't know you? Get out of this place right now. Her tone was filled with undisguised disgust. She didn't deny it. Yulan, are you really not going to give me a chance to make it up to you? Yuanru felt a little sad. Sure. Unexpectedly, Gu Xingyin nodded. Yu Wenrui's eyes lit up. Gu Xingyin turned to look at him. I feel uncomfortable when I see you. If you leave this place far away and never appear in front of me again, I'll forgive you. Yu Wenrui's gaze dimmed. He knew it couldn't be that simple. Impossible, Yulan. He looked at her. My only wish now is to see you more while I'm alive. If I never see you again, I'd rather you never forgive me. Then get out. Gu Xingyin forced herself to cast a spell. Yu Wenrui only felt his vision darken, and he inexplicably appeared outside the valley. This method was simply unfathomable. He sighed with emotion. He knew that Yulan was probably in a fit of anger right now, so he didn't plan to provoke her. Gu Xingyin was really forcing herself to hold on. She had just endured that torture, and was now at her weakest. Yet she still forced herself to cast a spell. As soon as Yu Wenrui's body disappeared, she collapsed. System? The system knew what she meant and said. Yin Chuqing's face is already ruined, and her temper is getting worse. Her husband has gained a foothold in the new place, and is no longer so respectful to her. Now he even took a courtesan sent by a subordinate as his concubine. Yin Chuqing has been arguing with him for a long time. Gu Xingyin nodded. Now that things had turned out like this, there was probably no hope for Yin Chuqing in this lifetime. System, my mission is considered complete, right? The system knew what she meant and lit a candle for a certain man in its heart. The host can choose to leave this world. The original character will leave behind a clone, and live according to the host's wishes. Alright, after I left, she didn't recognize Yu Wenrui anymore. She went to a faraway place where no one could find her. She spent her days in the mountains and forests alone, without any disasters or worries. Gu Xingyin described the rest of Yulan's life. This was probably the life that the original Yulan wanted the most, right? System, extract me from this world. Gu Xingyin's heart was calm as he waited for the familiar feeling to appear in his soul. Yu Wenrui obediently waited outside the valley for several days without disturbing her. He wanted to wait for her to cool down a little before going to see her. He even thought that if he continued to stay by her side like this, would he be able to obtain her true forgiveness at the end of his life? However, he never thought that when he entered the valley again, it would really become an empty valley. The treehouse was still there, but the person inside was no longer there. He stood in the empty treehouse and finally understood a fact. That person really hated him to the core, and her heart was cold towards him. There was not a trace of falsehood in her words. I don't want to see you. You should never appear in front of me again. He raised his hand to cover his face. The sunlight was a little dazzling, and a transparent liquid slid down his face. Chapter 669. Host, do you want to choose a random skill from any world? Yes. Gu Xingyin was speechless as she looked at the random ability that the system gave her. It was actually Yulan's mind-reading ability. She looked at the world she was in and said decisively, Can I choose not to? The system flashed white. Yes. Gu Xingyin chose not to. What a joke. She had mind-reading ability in the previous world, but she could control it. It was up to her whether she wanted to listen or not. In this world, an ordinary human girl with such a skill would definitely be annoyed to death. Just think about it. Gu Xingyin met all kinds of people every day, and all kinds of strange psychological activities sounded in her mind. This was simply unbearable. Let's transfer the plot. Gu Xingyin accepted the plot while sizing up her surroundings. She was in a very clean small room. There was a desk against the wall with a small lamp on it. All kinds of books and learning materials were piled up. The owner of the room was obviously still a student. The room was very cozy and looked very comfortable. At a glance, she didn't see any valuable items. Obviously, the situation in this house could only be considered average. Coincidentally, the memory transfer was completed. The original owner, Qinyu, was a high school student. Her parents were ordinary workers, and she had an elder sister who was 2 years older than her. She didn't live very happily in this family. Her parents obviously favored their elder daughter. They seemed to only have some obligations to their younger daughter this year. Send her to school, provide for her food and clothes, and don't think too much about the rest. When Qinyu was young, she felt very wronged and upset. But as she gradually grew up, she gradually saw through it. She didn't hate them because they brought her into this world and raised her for so many years. This was a huge favor. They didn't owe her anything. Instead, she owed them a lot. She even thought that in the future, she would definitely choose a university far away from home and work to earn her living expenses. She would be far away from them and wouldn't be an eyesore. In the future, she would give them money for their retirement every month to repay their kindness. As for kinship, sorry, after more than 10 years of coldness and neglect, she didn't believe in this anymore. She had planned everything well, but she didn't expect that one thing would completely change her life. That day, when she came home from school, she saw two people sitting in her house who were dressed in clothes that clearly did not belong to this place. Her parents, on the other hand, were standing by her side in a reserved manner. The noblewoman was very excited when she saw her. She pulled her aside and said a lot of words. She probably meant that she was their daughter, and that the doctor had mistakenly taken her away from the hospital more than 10 years ago. Looking at the evasive look of her parents, she sneered in her heart. Did the hospital really make a mistake? Just like what was mentioned in the idol drama, she had a very handsome biological brother and a pair of powerful and influential parents. She should have been a real proud daughter of heaven. This incident was exposed because the girl who was supposed to replace her got into a car accident. During the blood transfusion, the doctor reported her blood type, which made the couple realize that something was wrong. In the end, they investigated the hospital where the baby was delivered back then, and only then did they discover the mistake back then. That girl was called Song Tian, a very proud little princess. Compared to Enchinyu, who had suddenly arrived, she seemed more like a member of this family. Chapter 670. Song Tian was supposed to be sent back to the Yin family, but the Song family's parents took pity on her leg, so they allowed her to continue living in the Song family. She could let the Yin family's parents visit her, and only return home after her injury had healed. Mr. and Mrs. Song had good intentions. They thought about how much they loved Enchinyu and felt guilty about it. They thought that Mr. and Mrs. and Miss Song Tian very much. However, in Song Tian's eyes, the couple who had raised her from a young age had finally found their biological daughter. As an adopted daughter, she was just an extra. She didn't want to go back to the Song family at all. Mr. and Mrs. Song's monthly salary wasn't even enough for her to buy a pair of shoes. She couldn't accept that she wasn't the daughter of a rich family, but the daughter of an ordinary family. She didn't even want to see Mr. and Mrs. N. She had been the daughter of the Song family since she was a child. Why did everything change after a car accident? If only everything could go back to how it used to be. If only. Enchinyu didn't exist. She lost her mind because of this. This thought became clear in her mind, and she made a final decision. She found someone to arrange a car accident. That boy had always liked her. He liked her so much that he was willing to sacrifice his own life. He drove his own car and ran a red light, knocking Enchinyu, who was crossing the road. Now that Enchinyu was dead, the boy had to bear all the responsibility. However, he was just a high school student. How could he withstand a professional interrogation? Mr. and Mrs. Song didn't expect that their biological daughter would be faced with such a tragedy. Mrs. Song fainted on the spot. When she woke up, she didn't want to see Song Tian again. Song Tian paid the price for what she had done, but Enchinyu would never come back. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and checked the time. It was time for school. She cleaned up and found that the living room was empty. In the Yin family, she would never have breakfast prepared for her. It was a little cold outside. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but wrap her jacket tighter around herself. She went to the best high school in the city and the tuition was extremely expensive. Enchinyu was able to attend this school because she was the top student in her class. She had scored full marks in almost every subject in the middle school entrance exam. The school had waived all her tuition fees and even gave her a large scholarship. Since they didn't need to spend their own money, father and mother didn't say much. If Gu Xingyin remembered correctly, Song Tian actually went to this school as well, but the two of them had never interacted before. The Song family's upbringing was very strict. Papa Song and Mama Song weren't like other families that let their children go to those private aristocratic schools. But even so, what Song Tian was wearing was definitely not a brand that an ordinary high school student could afford. She bought a cup of soy milk and 2 buns and ate them as she walked. Tian Tian, what are you looking at? Song Tian Tian came back to her senses. Seeing that her friend was calling her, she smiled and said, "Nothing. I just thought that the girl looked familiar." Her friend glanced at Gu Xingyin's back and said with a smile, "Oh, she's in Qinyu. She's the top student in our school. She's the winner of the first-class scholarship every year." Song Tian glanced at the girl and felt that she looked a lot like her mother from the side. But her mother didn't have any relatives with the surname, and judging from her shabby appearance, she couldn't be her mother's relative. Song Tian didn't think much of it and walked towards the classroom. Chapter 671. Qinyu grew up in a poor family, so she had a cold personality. However, there were rarely any grudges between the students. At most, her classmates just thought that the girl with the best grades and the prettiest girl in the class was a little aloof. She had a few friends in the class who she could talk to, but none of them were close friends. There were 2 tables of girls gossiping in front of her. "Did you see Song Tian from the 5th class today? I saw the watch on her wrist in a magazine 2 days ago. What's so strange about that? Which item on that young lady's body isn't branded?" One of the girls said enviously. "Her family is so rich. I see her being chauffeured to school every day." Gu Xingyin shook her head and smiled. It was no wonder. How could a spoiled little princess like her endure the life of an ordinary person? After a day of studying, Gu Xingyin went home. As soon as she opened the door with her key, she heard the noise in the living room and the aroma of stewed soup coming from the kitchen. Gu Xingyin knew that the eldest daughter of the family, Qinqi, was back. As soon as she entered the house, there was a strange silence in the room. Then Qinqi, who was sitting on the sofa, spoke first. You're back? Are you hungry? Mom made some soup. It smells so good." Qinqi was the only person in the family who would call Qinyu Yu. She was also the only one who cared about her younger sister. Gu Xingyin had a good impression of her. Gu Xingyin smiled at her older sister. Then, she ignored the young couple who pretended not to see her, and went back to her room without looking back. After she entered the room, Mrs. N turned around and scolded, "Look at her. What's with her attitude? Did I give birth to her to collect a debt?" Qinqi had been spoiled since she was a child, so she was bold with her words. She said to her mother, "Mom, don't scold you. You two are too biased. If you didn't go overboard, she wouldn't be like this now." She was also puzzled. "You like me so much and you don't favor boys over girls. Why can't you treat Yu better? Could it be that she was adopted?" Mother N's face changed, and she pretended to be angry. "You child, what nonsense are you talking about? All right. I'll go check if the soup is ready." At the dining table, Gu Xingyin consciously sat at the furthest corner. "Come on, Chi-Chi, have some soup." Mrs. N scooped a bowl of soup and handed it to Qinqi. "You must be having a hard time at school. It's not easy for you to come back, so you must nourish yourself well." Qinqi was studying in a university in the city next door, and she would only come back once every few months. Sometimes, she would even come back for a semester. Qinqi winked at her mother, who understood her daughter's intention. Although she was reluctant, she didn't want to disappoint her eldest daughter. She took out a bowl and scooped some soup for Gu Xingyin. "Qinyu, have some soup." Gu Xingyin glanced at it and took it in silence. She politely thanked her mother. In the evening, Gu Xingyin went back to her room after dinner. Not long after, Qinqi pushed the door open and walked in. "Sister." Gu Xingyin put down the pen in her hand and called out to her with a smile. Qinqi was slightly shaken. She joked, Yu, if you go to university in the future, there will be a lot of boys chasing after you." Her younger sister didn't look like her parents. Everyone in the family had ordinary looks, and Qinqi was considered pretty and cute. However, Qinyu had fair skin and exquisite features. She didn't look like she was born with the genes of the family. Chapter 672. And Chinchi had also secretly thought about the plots of novels and dramas when she was a child. However, when she grew up, she realized that she was overthinking things. How could such coincidences happen in real life? Her younger sister might have inherited the best genes of the Yin family. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say anything. And Chinchi took out a small box. I brought you a present. Gu Xingyin took it. It was a bottle of eye drops. The words on it were written in German. I heard from my classmate that this is very good for preventing myopia. You're studying hard in high school now. Don't overwork your eyes, and Chinchi said. Gu Xingyin felt a surge of warmth in her heart. In the 16 years of Enchinyu's life, she was the only one who treated her sincerely. Oh right. And Chinchi looked a little conflicted. Don't worry too much about our parents. She couldn't say that her parents treated her the same way. She couldn't even say that her parents loved her. Father An and Mother An's hearts were so biased that they couldn't be any more biased. Gu Xingyin smiled faintly. Don't worry, sis. I'm fine. When I go to university in the future, I'll fill in a place further away and come back once a semester. And Chinchi looked a little sad. You, don't be like this. Gu Xingyin took her hand. Sis, we both know that Dad and Mom don't like me. If I go far away, I'll be happy to relax for them. And Chinchi didn't say anything in the end. She just sighed and told Gu Xingyin not to think too much. Then she left. And Chinchi only stayed at home for 4 days before she went back to school. Gu Xingyin personally went to the airport to see her off. On the way back, Gu Xingyin sensed something and turned around to take a look. Not far away, a young man in a black trench coat was standing there and looking at her. His eyebrows and eyes were very good-looking, and he was extremely handsome. It was rare to see such a good-looking person on the big screen. Gu Xingyin even saw a few young girls secretly taking out their phones to take pictures of him. She knew who he was. Song Yi was supposed to be this body's biological brother. But now they were just strangers. Gu Xingyin only took a glance before she turned her head back and walked towards the exit. However, her heart was far from being as calm as it appeared on the surface. System, what's going on? How could he be my biological brother? What kind of development was this? The system remained silent for a long time, which was rare. Finally it replied, I don't know. Gu Xingyin. Could it be that he wanted her to be a considerate little sister to make up for the harm she had done to him in the previous world? Gu Xingyin said that she couldn't do it at all. Song Yi would never be able to marry and have children normally. Gu Xingyin could not tolerate her lover being with another woman, even if he had no memories of her. However, it was also impossible for her to be with him. After experiencing so many human worlds, Gu Xingyin, who already had basic human morals and ethics, could not accept such a thing. Her heart was in a mess, but she still walked forward calmly on the surface. Song Yi looked at the girl's back until she completely walked away and disappeared. She looked like his mother. This was the first impression he had when he first saw her. It wasn't that their facial features were too similar. It was just that when she lowered her head subconsciously or smiled, they looked 30% alike. Song Yi frowned and pondered for a while. In the end, he didn't come up with any conclusions, so he turned around and left. Chapter 673. Gu Xingyin went to look for Mr. and Mrs. An after she got home. You're moving out? Mrs. An was a little surprised. Yes. Gu Xingyin said softly. I plan to rent a single room next to the school. That way, I won't have to waste too much time going to and from school. I can also save some time to study. Of course, she couldn't say that they hated each other, but she had to find a reasonable excuse. She looked at Mrs. An's expression and added, My scholarship is enough to rent a room. As expected, Mrs. An agreed without much hesitation when she heard that she didn't need to pay for it. At night, in the bedroom of the An family, Mr. An's voice was a little hesitant. Yufeng, aren't we a little too harsh on Qingyu? After all, we've raised her for so many years. This relationship isn't any worse than our biological relationship. Mrs. An's voice was cold. She's not my Qingyu. You've said it yourself. We've raised her for more than 10 years. We've fed and clothed her. We've done everything that should be done for her. Mr. Inside, and didn't refute his wife. He had always felt guilty towards Chinyu. She was supposed to be the daughter of a rich family, and was brought to their house. He and his wife had never given her the love and care of her family. He wanted to make it up to her, but every time he brought it up, Yufeng would get angry. Over time he didn't bring it up anymore. The next day happened to be the monthly break. Gu Xingyin didn't hesitate to carry her luggage and move out. After school, she carried her school bag and saw Song Yi at the school gate again. This time he drove. Gu Xingyin watched Song Tian happily get into the car. Obviously he was here to pick up his sister. Two girls beside her said enviously. Tian said that he's her brother. He's so handsome. Her biological brother is picking her up from school. I'm so envious. When Song Yi closed the car door, he saw Gu Xingyin standing at the school gate. For some reason, he felt that the girl gave him a different feeling from the others. He asked casually, "Is that girl also from your school?" Song Tian curiously followed his gaze and saw that it was Gu Xingyin. She nodded and said, "She's in Chinyu, the top student in our grade." As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that something was amiss. Why was her brother suddenly interested in her? Oh, Song Tian dragged out her words and looked at Song Yi. "Brother, you can't have taken a fancy to her because she's pretty, right?" Hearing this, Song Yi chuckled. "Don't talk nonsense. Your classmate is still so young." Song Tian stuck out her tongue and did not say anything else. Although the two of them were biological siblings, Song Yi had been studying abroad all year round, so the two of them didn't spend much time together. She wanted to get close to him, but she always felt that this elder brother had a sense of distance when facing everyone, including herself. The two of them weren't as close as others thought. However, she still muttered softly, "I heard that her family is very ordinary. That's because Chinyu's parents don't like her. Her parents haven't even attended a single parent meeting." This was all the gossip that the people around her had told her. When Song Yi heard this, he thought of that girl's faint smile and frowned slightly. Would there be parents who didn't like their own daughter? Moreover, she was such an outstanding and beautiful daughter. Chapter 674. Time passed in the blink of an eye. It was almost time for Song Tian to get into a car accident. As expected, not long after Gu Xingyin arrived at school, she heard her classmates discussing this matter. "I heard it's a girl from the 5th class. It's that Song Tian who's said to be from a rich family." Gu Xingyin opened the book and read slowly, pretending that the gossip did not exist. Her classmates also spontaneously stopped gossiping around her. Speaking of which, it was strange. This top student in the class looked thin and small, but as long as she sat there without putting on any expression, she would naturally give off a feeling that strangers should not get close to her. Some people even joked in private that this was the aura of a top student. Ordinary people like them wouldn't understand it. Gu Xingyin raised her head slightly, and her mind went blank for a second. Song Tian was in a car accident, so the Song family should be coming soon. It was the power of money. It had been less than a month since the news of Song Tian's car accident spread. On this day, when Gu Xingyin returned home, she saw a middle-aged man and woman in front of her rented apartment. Although they were middle-aged, the couple looked very young. Judging from their faces, they looked to be in their 30s. Seeing Gu Xingyin, the woman's eyes immediately turned red. Are you in Chinyu?" Gu Xingyin looked at them warily and didn't open the door. "Who are you?" The man calmed down and said gently, "We're your parents' friends. We're here to see you." Gu Xingyin became even more vigilant. Liar. My parents don't have any friends who know about me. She was right. Ever since she was a child, the Yin couple only brought their eldest daughter with them when they went out to socialize. Some of their friends didn't even know that they had two daughters. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the couple's expressions were a little pained. When they investigated what happened back then, of course, they also investigated the Yin family. They found out clearly how the Yin couple had treated their youngest daughter all these years. Their daughter, who should have been the apple of their eye, had actually been ignored by another family for 16 years as if she was invisible. The woman finally burst into tears. "You? I'm your mother. I'm your biological mother." The man felt that this girl was too calm. He was afraid that she wouldn't believe them so easily. Sure enough, Gu Xingyin just looked at the two of them strangely, and then quickly took out her mobile phone. She bought it with her scholarship, and the Yin family didn't care about this kind of thing at all. I don't know who you are. You suddenly appeared at my door, and said such inexplicable words. Hurry up and leave, or I will call the police. Gu Xingyin said. However, the man saw that her hand that was holding the phone was trembling slightly. Obviously, this girl was not as calm as she looked on the surface. She was very scared. After all, he was only a 16-year-old child. No matter how precocious he was, how mature could he be? The man's heart softened, but at the same time he hated the Yin couple. Letting a teenage girl live alone outside. Aren't they afraid that she will be in danger? What kind of parents are they? She is so precocious because no one has ever planned for her, right? Chapter 675. He said softly. Don't be nervous. We're really not bad people. Gu Xingyin choked. No bad person would write that word on their face. Papa Song was speechless. He felt that this girl was unexpectedly cute. He smiled and said, I'll call your parents now and see if it's convenient for them to come over. He really dialed Papa N's number in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's familiar voice came from the other end of the line. Papa Song chatted with him briefly before the two hung up. Gu Xingyin heard it clearly. Papa N said that he would rush over with his wife soon. Papa Song looked at Gu Xingyin. Now you believe that we're not bad people, right? Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment. She apologized to the two of them, then took out the key to open the door and let them in. Gu Xingyin was just a student after all. She rented a very ordinary single room. After putting a bed and a desk in the room, there was no extra space at all. Now that there were two adults, it was very crowded. However, although the room was small, Gu Xingyin kept it very clean. Even the not-so-white walls were pasted with warm stickers. When Mama Song entered the room and saw this scene, the tears that she held back with difficulty fell again. What kind of life had her daughter been living all these years? Gu Xingyin took out two stackable plastic stools from under the bed and put them next to the two of them. She was a little embarrassed. I only have this kind of stools here. Papa Song and Mama Song hurriedly said that they didn't mind. She went to get a pot of water and used disposable plastic cups to pour water for the two of them. Mama Song held the plain water and looked at Gu Xingyin in a daze. She didn't know what she was thinking. Papa Song was calm. He could see that Gu Xingyin was a little restrained and nervous. He just kept asking her some small questions with a smile, such as whether she was used to living alone, if she had any problems with her studies, and so on. Gu Xingyin answered slowly, and he relaxed a little. Papa Song and Mama Song looked at her. Although this child didn't like to talk much, she was very polite and well-behaved in front of the elders. Someone knocked on the door again. According to the phone call just now, it should be the Yin couple who came this time. Gu Xingyin went to open the door. As expected, it was Papa Song and Mama Song. Mama Song and Mama Song began to ask Gu Xingyin when she saw Papa Song. Come, did they ask you any strange questions? You didn't talk nonsense, did you? Ahem. Father-in coughed heavily, and Mother-in closed her mouth. Mr. and Mrs. Song, who were standing in the room, didn't look too good. Mama's is a mother and T's a mother's daughter. One could only imagine what kind of life Qin Yu had been living all these years. It was obviously very crowded in the small room with 4 adults. Papa Song suggested that they go out and talk. He deliberately turned around and said to Gu Xingyin, You Papa. Uncle wants to talk to you. Can you come with us? Gu Xingyin nodded, and the few of them went to the nearest tea house and asked for a private room. After sitting down, Papa Song noticed that Gu Xingyin had chosen a seat far away from Papa Song and Mama Song. She was as cold as she was when they first met. It was obvious that she didn't have a good relationship with Papa Song and Mama Song. Chapter 676. Mr. Song began to briefly explain what he had found out. After he finished, Mrs. N was the first to react. That's impossible. Qin Yu is my daughter. How could there be a mistake? If Mr. Song hadn't investigated her attitude towards Qin Yu over the years, and witnessed how she treated his daughter with his own eyes, he might have believed her words. I've already checked the information of the two families. My wife gave birth in the same hospital as you, so we can't rule out the possibility that there's a mistake, Mr. Song said patiently. Before they came to Gu Xingyin's place, they had actually gone to see Mr. and Mrs. N, but they had immediately turned hostile and chased them out when they heard that it was about the child. Mrs. N only said coldly, "That's impossible." Her repeated refusal to cooperate was infuriating. Mrs. Song flew into a rage on the spot. "It's not up to you to decide whether or not it's possible. You can tell who Qingyu resembles at a glance. Do you dare to let Qingyu do a paternity test with us?" Mrs. N retorted. "Who knows who you are? Do you think Qingyu will agree to do a DNA test just because you want it? I'm telling you, I won't agree to it." Mr. and Mrs. Song had obviously never seen such an unreasonable person. Mrs. Song was so angry that her body trembled. Mr. Song's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Shouldn't a normal person's first reaction be to find out the truth after hearing what he said? After all, if there really was a mistake, it would mean that their biological daughter had been separated from them for so many years. How could they not be curious and anxious at all? How could they be so sure that it was impossible? Moreover, it would be fine if Mr. and Mrs. N cherished their daughter like a treasure, but they clearly didn't like Qingyu at all. Why were they obstructing her? Could it be that there was something fishy about this matter? If that was the case, the DNA test had to be done. He ignored Mrs. N and turned to Gu Xingyin. "Qingyu, you heard my conversation with Mr. N just now. I really want to find my biological daughter. I'm afraid that she's not living a good life out there. Are you willing to do the DNA test with me?" Gu Xingyin was a little hesitant. Any 16-year-old girl who encountered such a situation would probably be in a mess. Before Qingyu could say anything, Mrs. N scolded her. "Qingyu, your father and I have been providing you with food and clothes all these years. Have we ever mistreated you? Now, you're actually listening to the nonsense of two people who came out of nowhere and want to do a paternity test? Are you trying to anger your father and me to death? Why are you so fierce?" Mrs. Song stood up and stood in front of Gu Xingyin. "She's only a 16-year-old child. Is this how you treat your daughter?" Mother unrolled her eyes. "I'm disciplining my own daughter. It's none of your business." "You." Mama Song still wanted to say something, but Gu Xingyin interrupted her. "I'm willing." Gu Xingyin's voice was not very loud, but it was very firm. "I'm willing to do a paternity test with you," she said word by word. Mrs. N was stunned for a moment before she exploded. "Qingyu, you ingrate. I've raised you for so many years for nothing, Mom." Gu Xingyin stood quietly at the side with a calm expression. "Tell me honestly, after all these years, have you really treated me as your daughter?" Chapter 677. Her words were clear and light, but there seemed to be an indescribable magic, which made Mother N unconsciously shut her mouth. Mother N, when I was a child, you bought the latest toys for my sister, bought beautiful dolls, and took her to the amusement park to play. But what about me? You didn't even care if it fit me or not. You just bought 5 or 6 sets of new clothes, and that was all the new clothes I had for that year. Not to mention taking me out to play. I always remember that when I was in the 5th grade of primary school, an aunt from your company came to our house to play. When she saw me, she said, "Is this your child?" I always thought that Qingxi was the only child in your family. When I was a child, I secretly cried and wondered if you didn't like me because I wasn't as good as my sister. But later, I understood that no matter how good I was, you still wouldn't like me. I've always wanted to ask why. If you really didn't like me, why did you give birth to me in the first place? I've also thought about it. Is it possible that I was really picked up or adopted? Is that why you don't like me so much? No matter what the truth is, I'm willing to accompany these 2 uncles and aunties to do a DNA test today. It's not that I really don't think I'm your daughter, but I feel that they really care about the biological daughter that they missed out on. I wish that they can find her soon. I don't want there to be another child like me in this world who suffers such unfair treatment. As for you anyway, you don't like me so much. I'll do one more thing to make you unhappy. It'll just make you hate me more." She finished this sentence without changing her expression and showed a faint smile to Mrs. Song, who had already burst into tears. "Auntie, let's go." Mrs. Song finally couldn't help but hold her in her arms. "Qingyu, you're a good child. They don't know how to cherish you." Gu Xingyin's eyes were also a little wet. She said that she didn't care and didn't take it to heart, but it was just because no one had ever cared about her. Tears were the most precious in front of people who cared about her. Gu Xingyin forced herself to hold back the tears in her eyes. She smiled and said, "I know. I've always been outstanding. They didn't treat me well. It's their loss to lose such an outstanding daughter." Mrs. Song also wiped her tears and took Gu Xingyin's hand out of the door. "Whether you are my daughter or not, from today on, I will treat you as my daughter." The three of them stood up and walked out of the door, completely ignoring the Yin family's parents who were sitting on the side in a daze. "The test results are out." The doctor in the white coat handed a document to Father Song. Even though they already knew the answer in their hearts, when they saw the number, Father and Mother Song were so excited that their eyes turned red again. Mrs. Song looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing at the side in a daze. With tears in her eyes, she smiled and said, "You, my child, are you willing to call me mommy?" Gu Xingyin was still in a daze. She did not expect that her childhood suspicions were all true. They didn't like her not because she was bad, and it wasn't because she had an older sister. It was because she wasn't their daughter at all. A huge sour feeling overwhelmed her heart. She finally couldn't help but cry out loud. Chapter 678. When the Song family placed the information in front of the Yan's parents, they finally shut their mouths. Mrs. N was still unwilling to give up. She stared at Gu Xingyin and said, Your father and I have never mistreated you all these years, have we? Now that you've found your biological parents, don't you want your father and I who have raised you for so many years? You'd better shut up." Mrs. Song finally couldn't stand it anymore. She was well educated, but in front of such a shameless woman, she couldn't hold it in. "What do you mean by we haven't mistreated you? Do you mean we haven't mistreated you when we gave you a meal? I'll give you a sum of money as compensation for taking care of Qingyu all these years. As for the rest, I don't want to say more." She would treat her daughter well in the palm of her hand. People like them wouldn't have the right to trample on her. Ever since Gu Xingyin found out about that matter, he had become much quieter. Mr. and Mrs. Song also understood her, and didn't force her to call them parents. It was already a pleasant surprise for them that she agreed to go back to the Song family with them. It was Gu Xingyin's first time to visit the Song family's house. This will be your home from now on. I've already tidied up a room for you. Your father and I bought everything personally. Let me take you to have a look now." Mrs. Song held Gu Xingyin's hand and walked upstairs as if she was showing off a treasure. Opening the door, Gu Xingyin saw a beautiful room. This was the room that all teenage girls yearned for. There was a big princess bed, piled up with plush toys that were bigger than a person. There were all kinds of exquisite and beautiful jewelry on the dressing table. And the wardrobe was full of the new products of the season from major brands. "Do you like it?" Mrs. Song looked at her expectantly. How could she not like it? Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly turned red. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Mrs. Song almost suspected that she was hallucinating. She asked in a trembling voice, What did you call me just now? Can you call me again?" Gu Xingyin called her mom with tears in her eyes. Then Mrs. Song hugged her with the same red eyes. "Good, my good daughter." Gu Xingyin hugged her waist tightly and whispered, "No one has ever been so nice to me." Her voice was very soft. She thought that Mrs. Song wouldn't be able to hear her, but in fact she did. Mrs. Song sniffled and held back the tears that were about to fall. After a long time, she let go of Gu Xingyin. "Look at me. I was so focused on bringing you up that I forgot that it's almost time to eat. You must be hungry, right? I've already instructed Sister Lin to prepare the meal." When she went downstairs with Gu Xingyin, the Song family was already sitting at the dining table. Other than Father Song, there was also Song Yi, as well as Song Tian, who was recuperating at home. When Song Yi saw Gu Xingyin, he was surprised. So it's her? His parents had already told him about his younger sister. He knew that Song Tian wasn't his younger sister. It seemed that the girl in front of him, who looked a little like his mother, was his real younger sister. Song Tian's feelings were very complicated. Not long after she was discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Song and her husband discussed for half the night. In the end, they chose to confess to her. She wasn't their daughter. When she was born, the hospital gave her to the wrong person. But after all, the Song family had raised her for so many years. They still had feelings for her. Mrs. Song said that she would always treat Song Tian as her daughter. But Song Tian didn't expect that the person she replaced was Enchinyu. Chapter 679. Mrs. Song pulled Gu Xingyin to sit beside her. During dinner, Mrs. Song personally scooped rice for her and asked her what dishes she liked to eat. Song Tian watched as her parents circled around Gu Xingyin. She couldn't vent her anger no matter how hard she tried. She suddenly screamed, attracting the attention of Mrs. Song, who was scooping soup for Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Song looked at Song Tian in surprise. Tian, what's wrong? Tears welled up in Song Tian's eyes. She said pitifully, my leg suddenly hurt. This wasn't a small matter. Mr. Song quickly called the family doctor in charge of Song Tian and asked him to come over and take a look. Mrs. Song also comforted her. Once again, Song Tian experienced the feeling of being surrounded by everyone. She secretly and proudly glanced at her. Her eyes were full of power. Look, so what if you're our biological daughter? I'm the one who's loved the most. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment. Then, she lowered her head and ate her meal as usual. Suddenly, a drumstick was placed in her bowl. Gu Xingyin looked up. It was Song-yi. Don't always eat vegetables. It's not nutritious. Song-yi had a faint smile on his face. He saw all of Song Tian's little tricks. He didn't like it, but he didn't want to expose her in front of his parents. Gu Xingyin smiled at him. Song Tian's mood, which had just improved, became gloomy again. Song Yi's brother had been studying overseas. They didn't spend much time together, and their relationship was only faint. Song Yi treated her more like an older brother's responsibility to his younger sister. He didn't even put food in her bowl. Unlike Song Tian's gloominess, Mr. and Mrs. Song were more relieved to see this. Their eldest son rarely got close to others. Even with Song Tian, he was always indifferent. They were worried that he wouldn't get along well with Yu. Now it seemed like they worried too much. Putting aside this interlude, the meal was quite harmonious. Gu Xingyin adapted very quickly to this new family. Gu Xingyin's father and mother always felt that they had mistreated this daughter. They always wanted to give her all the good things. Gu Xingyin seemed to be a little unaccustomed to this kind of enthusiasm, but every time, she would accept it with a smile. This made her parents feel gratified and touched. It was a rest day. As soon as Gu Xingyin came downstairs, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. The hall was filled with all kinds of colored lights and decorations. The most eye-catching thing was a huge birthday cake on the big table in the middle. Everyone in the Song family stood there and looked at her. Mama Song smiled at her and said, "Yu, happy birthday." Gu Xingyin's expression changed from confusion to joy. In Enchinyu's memory, there was nothing about birthdays. That couple in the Yin family was willing to swap their 2 newborn children for the Song family's wealth. This was enough to show how selfish they were. How could they spend so much effort on Enchinyu, who wasn't related to them by blood? Looking at Enchinyu's blank expression, Song Tian felt a little disdainful. So what if Enchinyu was the top student in the grade? She still looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. What a disgrace. Gu Xingyin's face suddenly broke into a smile. It wasn't the usual faint smile, but a happy smile from the bottom of her heart. She walked briskly downstairs and hugged Mr. and Mrs. Song. "Mom, Dad, thank you. I'm very happy." Chapter 680. Then she walked to Song Yi's side. "Brother, can I give you a hug?" she asked. Mr. and Mrs. Song were a little nervous. Although their eldest son looked gentle, he didn't like to be close to others. He didn't even hug Song Tian when he was young. What if he rejected Yu and made her feel bad? However, they worried too much. Song Yi didn't know why, but when he saw the girl looking at him with her dark eyes, he felt that he couldn't reject her. He opened his arms to her. Gu Xingyin jumped into his arms happily. Smelling the light lotus fragrance, Gu Xingyin was very satisfied. Even though they couldn't be lovers, it felt good to be a younger sister who was doted on by her brother. Song Tian sat in the wheelchair and watched her brother and Qingyu hug each other. She clenched the wheelchair so hard that her fingernails left marks on it. She would never forget how she acted like a spoiled child and asked her brother to hug her when she was young. However, she had always been like a fish in water in front of her parents, but her brother rejected her time and time again. Back then, she could sense that although her brother didn't dislike her, they weren't very close either. She thought it was because of his personality. After all, her brother was so gentle and polite even to her parents. But why? Why would he put food in Qinyu's bowl and hug her? Was it because she was his biological sister? She had been his sister for more than 10 years. In his eyes, she couldn't compare to a so-called biological sister, whom he had only known for a few days. Tian. Song Tian was brought back to reality by Gu Xingyin's voice. So she was the only one left. She wanted to hug her. Song Tian looked at her coldly. She didn't like Qingyu from the bottom of her heart. If it weren't for Qingyu, she wouldn't have had such an accident in her life. Qingyu must hate her too. Song Tian took away her status as the heiress of the family, but she still pretended to be so friendly. It was disgusting. I don't want to give you a fake hug. Qingyu, I don't like you. Song Tian had been spoiled by the Song family since she was young. She never cared about other people's feelings when she spoke. Anyway, her parents would always listen to her. But this time, she miscalculated. Song Tian, what are you talking about? Papa Song's complexion turned somewhat ugly. He looked at Yu and then at Song Tian. He really felt that he had spoiled Song Tian all these years. Where's your upbringing? Is that what I taught you since you were young? Mama Song also had a look of disapproval on her face. Gu Xingyin stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Song Tian felt wronged after being scolded by Papa Song. She yelled, "It's true. I don't like Qingyu. Our family was originally fine, but everything changed when she came. Dad, Mom, you don't like me anymore. Is it because I'm not your daughter?" This time, Papa Song was also speechless. This kind of thing was a huge blow to the two children. Tian had been spoiled by them since she was young. She probably couldn't accept that she wasn't the daughter of the Song family. Song Yi immediately looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing there. After hearing Song Tian's words, the girl was probably the most embarrassed and at a loss. She was supposed to be the little princess of this family, but in Song Tian's words, she became an outsider who ruined her happy life. Chapter 681. She stood there awkwardly, seemingly uneasy because of Song Tian's words. But at that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Song were thinking about how to comfort Tian. No one would have thought that compared to Song Tian, who had always been pampered in this family, the cautious Qingyu was the one who needed the most protection. Song Yi felt that this girl was the most innocent and pitiful. He didn't know what possessed him, but he couldn't bear to see her sad. Whenever he saw her unhappy, he would feel as if his heart was being pricked by thin needles, and the pain would be long and painful. Gu Xingyin was standing there when she suddenly felt a warmth approaching her. Then her hand was held. "Dad, Mom, I don't think we can continue with this birthday party. I'll take you out to play," Song Yi said to Mr. and Mrs. Song. Mr. and Mrs. Song looked at their eldest son in surprise. They only realized how hurtful Song Tian's words were when they saw Gu Xingyin's reddened eyes. Go. Have fun." Mrs. Song also felt that it wasn't appropriate for Yu and Tian to be together, so she hurriedly said to her eldest son. Mr. Song wanted to say something, but he looked at Gu Xingyin and sighed in the end. Song Yi held Gu Xingyin's hand all the way until they arrived at the garage. Song Yi then let go of her hand, and they got into the car. Song Yi turned sideways and fastened her seatbelt for her. "Thank you, big brother," said Gu Xingyin. Song Yi only felt that hearing the word brother from her mouth made him feel very satisfied. He pretended to be unhappy. "If you say that again, I won't be happy. Since you're already calling me big brother, it's only right for a big brother to pamper his little sister. Don't let me hear the word thank you from your mouth again." He looked at the girl in front of him, who had been nervous because of the first half of his sentence, and he couldn't help but smile. Did your family call you Yu in the past? Asked Song Yi. Gu Xingyin shook her head. No, they just called me by my name. Song Yi was silent for a moment. Such a simple sentence was enough to let him know that this girl was not favored in the other family. Then, I'll call you Qin Qin from now on. Only Big Brother can call you that, he suddenly said. Sure. Gu Xingyin smiled. It felt so good to be cherished and loved by someone. All right, my dear Princess Qin Qin. Where do you plan to go today? Song Yi asked with a smile. Gu Xingyin tilted her head and seemed to think for a while. Then she shook her head. I don't know. I've never been to an amusement park before. When she said this, she was very calm, as if she was talking about something very trivial. Song Yi's heart ached for a moment. He controlled his emotions and said with a smile, Then Big Brother will take you out to play today. He brought Gu Xingyin to the largest amusement park in the city. This place was a sacred place for couples to date, and it was also the favorite place for children. After he parked the car and walked out, he saw Gu Xingyin standing there waiting for him. She was holding 2 big cotton candies in her hands. He couldn't help but smile. This little sister of his looked mature and steady, but in fact, she was still a little girl on the inside. When Gu Xingyin saw him, she smiled and handed him one. Song Yi was surprised. For me. Chapter 682. Gu Xingyin nodded with a smile. When I was young, I used to watch other kids holding cotton candy in their hands at the amusement park. I was always envious of them. But no one took me there, and no one bought it for me. When I grew up, I gradually stopped thinking about it. She opened her mouth and took a bite. It was so sweet. I just saw it and suddenly wanted to buy one to try. Song Yi looked at her and suddenly said, Actually, I've never eaten cotton candy before. Thank you, Qin Qin. Gu Xingyin was surprised. You've never eaten cotton candy before? Song Yi nodded. He didn't tell her that it was because he was precocious and had no interest in these things that kids liked. That day, Song Yi, who had never been to an amusement park before, accompanied Qin Yu, who had never been to an amusement park before. They played all the rides in the amusement park. When they got home, the sky was already dark. Song Yi received a phone call. He said, Yet Qin Qin and I are outside. We won't be home for dinner. Don't wait for us. We're still outside. Okay. He hung up the phone. Gu Xingyin asked, Was it Mom? Song Yi nodded and turned around. I just told her that we won't be home for dinner. Qin Qin, you won't be mad, right? Gu Xingyin shook her head. After what happened during the day, she wouldn't be happy to see Song Tian. It was better to be outside. Let's go. I'll take you to a place. Gu Xingyin followed Song Yi. He parked the car outside a hotel. The waiter led them to the reserved seats. Gu Xingyin didn't know when he booked a private room. As soon as she opened the door, she covered her mouth in surprise. An exquisite and beautiful cake was quietly placed on the table. The bright red number 16 was burning faintly. Song Yi led her to sit down. I messed up the birthday party during the day. I can only make it up to you. Time was tight, so I couldn't make it better. Song Yi explained to her. Next year, I'll definitely give Qin Qin a perfect birthday party, he said seriously. Gu Xingyin shook her head and looked at Song Yi with a smile. To me, this is already the most perfect birthday of my life. The birthday party during the day was not just her birthday. She saw clearly that the huge cake had Song Tian's name on it. Now there was only Qin Yu in the small private room. Her brother, Song Yi, had spent a lot of effort to prepare a birthday celebration for her. She closed her eyes and began to make her wish. Song Yi looked at Gu Xingyin under the candlelight. Her long and curly eyelashes cast a small shadow on her smooth cheeks. Her rosy lips were curved, showing that she was in a good mood. From the first time he saw her, he felt that this girl was beautiful. Now that he knew that she was his sister, he felt that Gu Xingyin was perfect in every way. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and met Song Yi's focused gaze. His face softened under the candlelight. His pitch-black eyes were filled with gentleness as he looked at her. She couldn't help blushing. It was already very late when the siblings got home. Song Tian had already returned to her room to rest because of her leg injury. Papa Song and Mama Song were waiting for them in the living room. When they saw Gu Xingyin coming back, they both looked apologetic. Chapter 683. They didn't say much. They only asked them if they had a good time today and told them to go and rest. Mr. and Mrs. Song could tell that in their eldest son's heart. This sister who had just returned was much more important than Song Tian. Even when he took Yu out to play today, he was indirectly telling them that he was very dissatisfied with Song Tian. Gu Xingyin went back to her room to take a shower. She came out with her wet hair. Before she could dry her hair, she heard a knock on the door. Mrs. Song opened the door and came in with a plate of milk and fruit. "Why is your hair still wet?" Mrs. Song saw that Gu Xingyin's hair was still dripping with water, so she complained intimately. Gu Xingyin explained instinctively, "I just came out of the shower. I didn't have time to dry it yet." She pointed at the hairdryer she had just found. Mrs. Song walked over to take the hairdryer and asked her to sit down. "Let me do it." Gu Xingyin sat down obediently. She could feel a hand gently holding her hair and fondling it. She probably knew why Mrs. Song was here. They both knew what happened today. The one who had been wronged was Gu Xingyin. Mrs. Song and her daughter didn't think about it for now. They enjoyed this rare moment of warmth. After her hair was dry, Mrs. Song put down the things in her hands and sat down beside Gu Xingyin. "Yu, I know. Tian was unreasonable today. You've been wronged," Mrs. Song said. Gu Xingyin lowered her head and didn't say anything. She didn't know how to reply. It was impossible to say that she wasn't angry or wronged. Song Tian disliked her for disturbing her life. She didn't even blame her for taking away the life that should have been hers. However, she couldn't say those words in front of Mrs. Song. And Qingyu wasn't Song Tian. Unlike her, and Qingyu didn't grow up in such a carefree family. And Qingyu couldn't complain so impulsively and directly. How could Mama Song not know that her daughter wasn't feeling good? She sighed and reached out to hug Gu Xingyin. "I have already discussed it with your father. When Tiantian's leg is healed, we will send her back to her own home. The Yin family must miss their daughter very much." Gu Xingyin lay quietly and obediently in her arms. After a long time, she finally gave a soft hum. The Song parents seemed to have told Song Tian the news. Gu Xingyin didn't see Song Tian with her own eyes, but she heard that she threw a huge tantrum and cried, saying that she didn't want to leave the Song family. However, Father and Mother Song were determined this time. Although they couldn't bear to part with their daughters, they knew that with both of their daughters in the Song family, there were some conflicts that couldn't be resolved. Both were flesh and blood, but if Father and Mother Song had to choose, their biological daughter, who had grown up outside and had never experienced the slightest bit of familial warmth, would undoubtedly make them more reluctant to let go. Moreover, the DNA test was already out. They had no reason to let Song Tian continue to stay in the Song family. The Song family had already discussed it with the Yin family. They could visit Song Tian while she was recuperating. They could familiarize themselves with each other. They wouldn't be strangers when Song Tian returned to the Yin family. As for what happened back then, seeing the Yin family's attitude, Mrs. Song and Mr. Song knew that there was something fishy going on. However, they didn't intend to pursue it for Song Tian's sake. This could be considered their last bit of appreciation for Song Tian. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.